Hello and welcome back to another episode of Manufacturing Stream Podcast from L2L. As per usual, I am your host, Chris, and today I am joined by two very special guests talking about something a little bit different but extremely familiar this week. We are going to be doing a deep dive into our brand new research report, which is on the impact, the costs, kind of the wide-ranging implication and causes of downtime in your manufacturing operations. It's a word that we all know really well. We dread it, and yet it's a fact of life in manufacturing. So we're going to explore that and the results of our latest research report. But before we get into that, I'm going to introduce the two people I have on this podcast. We have Annika Björkholm. She is our VP of Marketing here at L2L, and I believe this is your first time joining us on a podcast, correct?
Official first time, yes. Very excited. I hope I can provide some good perspectives. We have Eric, who's obviously the manufacturing expert, but I hope that I can provide some new perspectives, kind of take all of these awesome stats and kind of paint a picture of what it actually means, kind of in a bigger picture and kind of a bit more nuanced. So yeah, happy to be on board.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And Eric, the man needs no introduction. He's our Director of Manufacturing Solutions. You've done a lot of things in the world of manufacturing, and we love having your wisdom and expertise on the podcast.
Thanks. Yeah,
it's always a treat.
I was on a call this morning, and I was talking with somebody that the first time I started talking lean and stuff was like 1987. So, goodness.
I'm going to pretend that I was born then.
Yeah.
Definitely alive at that point in time.
That's all right. Good.
Well, very cool. So before we get into it, I want to let you know that we will provide a link to where you can go and download this report for free, and we'll put that in wherever this is hosted, whether you're on YouTube or finding this elsewhere. We're going to get you set up with a link so that you can download this report for free and go ahead and peruse it at your leisure, because we have a little bit of time here, but we're not going to have time to get into everything. There's a lot of data in here. Make sure you go check it out yourself. And yeah, let's get started. So, downtime, right? There's a lot of different kinds of downtime. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. There's a lot of different causes. But the big finding on this report that I think is staggering is that the majority of people that we talk to, and we talk to people over all industries, I believe we have 9 or 10 different industries covered in this report, from food and beverage to CPG to automotive, you name it. The majority of these people say that downtime, whether it's planned or unplanned downtime, is costing their business at least $250,000 per year. And that is about 360 hours annually. And that the majority of these hours, and I think this is the particularly kind of alarming thing, the majority of these hours, so most of those 360 hours are actually from unplanned downtime, which is where your line is down, you did not plan it, you were not expecting it. This is from operator error, machine failure, if you name it. Unforeseen circumstances is what's taking down and costing this money. And when we start to kind of dive a little bit more into the numbers, we find that this $250,000 is kind of the minimum benchmark, right? Like, these costs are actually much, much, much higher than $250,000. I'm curious, Eric, from someone who's worked in the industry for a long time, when you see $250,000 in downtime, does that strike you as a low figure? Does that seem right on the money? When you see that number, does that make sense, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, annually it actually seems kind of low. I know we're probably just asking these people questions, and so they're not pulling up any data. The other side of that is, do they have the data that actually they're only kind of swagging at it, right? So I'm thinking $250,000 is low. We have clients at $250,000 a week is what they're losing in downtime. Right?
Wow.
It just depends on that. So, but I would say, yeah, definitely not surprising at all. Not surprising that people may or may not know the exact number, and so I get that. So yeah, it doesn't strike me as surprising at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and like I said, I think this 250,000 is just kind of that minimum benchmark number.
I think that's what people are aware of. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what you were alluding to as well, Eric. Like that's what can actually be like pointed out, like, okay, we know that we had X minutes or hours of downtime then and then. So I honestly think that, agreeing, I think when we talk about that $250,000 in annual downtime costs, probably pretty conservative. Putting that into perspective, that's 360 hours of lost production on an annual basis. And essentially that means that manufacturers are losing, let's say, 15 full days of production capacity yearly. And, thinking about it, kind of putting that into perspective, that's like shutting down your entire operation for 3 work weeks. but instead of that all happening all at once, where, you could plan around it, it's kind of, this death by 1,000 cuts throughout the entire year. And, you never really know when to expect it either. So I think that's kind of the real cost perspective of downtime as well.
I had a guest on a podcast that we did a couple weeks ago, and he shared two really pretty wild stories of downtime back when he was working at Rolls-Royce. Unfortunately, he wasn't manufacturing the really cool cars. He was working in I'm a car guy. I got really excited when I heard he worked at Rolls-Royce, but he was actually making jet engines, which was actually also pretty cool. And we give this figure, but they had an unplanned downtime incident. It was 3 days. They had a 3-day shutdown on a line, which was pretty catastrophic. And they estimated that cost them between 60 and 100 million pounds. And that was for an unplanned downtime event. And he also told this great story of having to negotiate a planned shutdown of a line. And he told this great story. We can also include a link to this in the description if you want to go check this out. It's a really fascinating story. But essentially, he had to negotiate with his bosses for how many days of planned downtime they could actually get in order to do this maintenance that would keep them running much longer. But if you know that 3 days costs about 100 million pounds, you can only imagine what the 8 days that they tried to negotiate for would cost that business. So even if it is planned downtime, it still is making a major business impact. The other statistic that we have here is that more than half of the respondents say that this excessive downtime is actively impairing their ability to meet production targets, hit their shipping deadlines, or all of the above in the last year. So this is something that is on the ground. It's causing very real problems in their supply chain. So it's definitely an intense thing for people to deal with.
When you have a plant that you have a fairly good grip on what the capacity is or what you have to do, and then you have these unplanned interruptions in that process, there's no doubt that it has a ripple effect all the way down, even to what's on the shelves at the store or what is on the shelves of your customers. Because that disruption stops the entire flow, especially when it's unplanned. The one thing we've learned about planned versus unplanned downtime is that an unplanned downtime event can be 4 to 10 times more costly than a planned event. And so think about what happens when when a machine breaks or a system stops or a quality problem or a safety incident. Think of all of the workflows and all of the processes that have to happen in order to get this thing back up and running. And then think of the chaos that happens in that time that it goes down and the time that it comes back up. And then what you do, how you manage that is very important as well with inside of that. And this is where we talk about reactive versus proactive, because a lot of companies, and I know the report talks about this, is a lot of companies are in that reactive mode. And this is how they've chosen to do the work. They need to understand that being reactive is a choice. You chose how to do that, right? You just talked about how hard it would be for somebody to go to their boss and say, I've got to have some time to take this thing down so it doesn't break down. It shouldn't be hard. No. We know that that's the process, and it shouldn't be hard, but companies choose that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And honestly, like thinking about it kind of from that ROI perspective, or kind of the per minute loss as well, when you consider that manufacturers, averaging 30 hours of downtime on a monthly basis are losing, let's say, approximately $12 per minute. So that would be like $720 per hour. And, looking at it, obviously compounding to over $200,000 per month for an operation with 10 sites. So it kind of balloons pretty quickly, and that cost definitely grows when you compound that impact. But to your point, Eric, like suddenly that investment in prevention looks very different. So a 2-hour unplanned outage would cost around, let's say, $1,400. Most manufacturers would spend $1,400 on preventive measures, but there's definitely that, like, okay, would you though? Like, it's so important to make sure that things don't break. But is that actually, at the end of the day, is that prioritized? Because I think, most companies save so much money when they invest ahead of time instead of waiting for that inevitable downtime to happen.
I think
sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the one, kind of the allegory I always use. Is that the right word, allegory? Anyways, sure. is that you are going to have downtime. Now, do you choose when it is, or does the machine choose when it is?
Exactly.
You are going to have downtime, right? So you have to decide, when is it going to be? Is it going to be on your terms or on the process's terms? And you will always know that the machine or the process or whatever will fail at the absolute worst time. Like exactly when you need it to perform is when it's going to fail. And so if you let it choose, it will always choose the wrong time. If you choose, you get to choose the time.
Yeah.
So
I think that's totally like, and also thinking about that time as kind of a waste as well, because that time could be spent by your best people, your engineers, your managers, your problem solvers across the floor to, spend that time not firefighting, but innovating. So I think that's a huge part of it as well. So obviously kind of that hidden opportunity cost there as well, with like, okay, you only have so many hours. So how are you going to spend that time in the best way possible with the best return? So obviously, one thing that really stood out to me in this report and the findings was that 72% of leaders personally check in on downtime events. So the vast majority, that's executive talent doing reactive work instead of strategic work.
Yeah, that's wild. Wow. And that's almost 3/4 as well, which is
that's
remarkable.
Like the vast majority.
Yeah. Now,
I have one more thing that I wanted to say on this kind of like, and that would be a comparison with labor costs as well, because of course it's not just about time, But essentially, it's also kind of putting this into perspective in terms of, the people costs, right? So one of the things that also struck me the most in our data was that facilities are losing more money in 5 minutes of downtime than they pay most operators in an hour. Okay, think about that. That's crazy. So 1 hour of downtime equals what they pay their highest paid floor managers for nearly a full day of work.
Yeah, truly.
1 hour.
Truly.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, going back to the stat that we talked about earlier, so 67% of companies are still taking a more reactive maintenance approach. So that's kind of what you were pointing to earlier, Eric. And they're essentially choosing to pay a premium price for downtime instead of investing in prevention.
Yep. Yeah. We, and I think I've said this before, Chris, in discussions that you and I have, is that maintenance, if you think about maintenance is not the place in the factory where you store the toolboxes. Maintenance is not the people. You're not referring to the people in the maintenance department. What maintenance is the system or the process that you choose to take care of your equipment. And if you choose reactive, you're going to pay a premium. You're paying that premium that Annika just talked about. If you choose preventative and proactive, then your costs are going to be reduced. But you choose. You decide. It's a decision. Back to the story before. It's a decision not to give up the machine for preventative maintenance. So you decided that you were going to live in the reactive world, and so you're paying for it.
Yeah. And in our industry, you often have to prove that decision. In the same conversation I had with the customer who used to work at Rolls-Royce, is in order to get those days of downtime, he had to negotiate. He had to systemically prove to his superiors the actual value of it by building an OEE tracker from scratch and proving it over months of data to say, hey, it's worth it to take these machines down for 6 months, or it's not 6 months, never 6 months, 6 days, is I think what he got in the end. So it's, you have to fight for that proactivity sometimes at every level of the organization as well, and really justify it with hard ROIs and hard numbers and that data. Eric, before we move on to the next section, I had one question as well. We always talk about unplanned downtime. That is the scary monster, right? That is machine failure. That is these things that you don't want to see cropping up. But I also have a sneaking suspicion that not all planned downtime is equally good, right? Like I'm sure that even if it is planned downtime, it can be planned poorly, it can be executed poorly, Absolutely. It can be executed inefficiently. I bet we see a lot of people losing money in a similar fashion for bad planned maintenance.
Yeah, absolutely. Plan. Listen, I referred to the thing earlier about 4 to 10 times more on a reactive issue.
Yeah.
Why is it 4 to 10 times more than good planned maintenance? Well, because if you think about when a machine goes down, you don't know if you have the parts. You don't know if you have the person who can fix it. You don't know if you have the skills. You don't know if you have the tools. All of that happens in the moment that it goes down. Yeah. You're not sure. So you're scrambling for parts, scrambling for information, scrambling for tools, that's costly. If you go into an unplanned or a planned downtime event without the right parts kitted, without the tools pre-staged, without the resources understood who needs to do it, without understanding that you're going to need a forklift all before you actually take the machine down to do planned, then you're being just as inefficient with inside of the planned downtime as you were with inside of the unplanned downtime. Yeah. So yes, you're exactly right. And this is where planning and scheduling comes into like a major portion. That's a whole other podcast, and we can talk about that. But if you are not performing your planned downtime properly, you're going to get the same losses because it's down. The other thing, too, is that here's the misnomer that people constantly get wrong when it comes to maintenance. The trick is not to do more planned maintenance. That is not the goal. The goal is not to do more planned maintenance. the goal is to do the right maintenance that keeps the machine up and running at the most efficient when you need it to run. So just putting more PMs in place is not good planned maintenance. Doing the right thing that keeps the machine up and running is the thing that we want to do. So
yeah. Cool. I think we should move on into a little bit more of the causes of downtime. We've talked a lot about PMs and unplanned maintenance, definitely. But there are also a lot of other causes. One of them, 74% of our respondents said that just simple delays in reporting issues led to these kind of cascading chain reactions that just grind everything to a halt. And Eric, maybe I'll start with you. This is kind of this is a broad category, right? A delay in reporting issues that can cover a lot of different things. I'm curious, like, what kind of problems have you seen customers or people you worked with in manufacturing? Like, can you give us some examples on what this reporting delay might actually look like in your operations?
The one comical one that I always use is the we're all familiar with the Peanuts cartoon and the Charlie Brown. You walk into a loud factory and the way that they actually call maintenance is over the loudspeaker, and what you get is, and that's what you hear. And then some maintenance person somewhere is supposed to hear that, and what they're actually saying is maintenance line 1 or whatever, and they go over and walk over to it. And all of that is the manual process of, now this person's got to remember, did I write it down? Who should I send over there? Somebody walks over there, they look at it and they go, oh, this is something I can't do. And then they got to get on the radio, they got to go find somebody, and then they got to do that whole, it's so archaic, but it still is prevalent in a lot of manufacturing facilities these days, and like that, and then if you really want to get, into high tech stuff, now we take that stuff and put it on an Excel sheet, right? So now we see it, and then when do we talk about it? We talk about it tomorrow morning. It's done. It's passed. There's nothing we can do about it, but we talk about it like somebody's going to glean some great information that's going to prevent this from happening again somewhere down the line, and it just doesn't happen. It's so predictable, so repeatable, and anybody that's listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. And guess what? I don't know if you're in a food factory, a car factory, a packaging factory. But I know you have those problems. So it's so predictable inside of manufacturing that this is what happens. So I can see where 76% is probably dead on when it comes to that number.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's really, to your point, Eric, it's really not, it's rarely just one problem, right? Like it's like a domino effect. Like minor stoppage becomes a material shortage, which becomes a shipping delay, which becomes a customer satisfaction issue. So it kind of cascades into this way bigger problem because of that kind of chain reaction of one simple delay or, a couple of minutes or an hour of downtime. And I think definitely, there's a huge difference there. The companies winning aren't just fixing those problems faster. They will be catching them before that first domino falls.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I've worked in a lot of different industries over the years, and, communication problems are prevalent in any industry. It can happen in a marketing team. I've worked in kitchens, I've worked in banks, I've worked in agriculture, and communication errors screw up all of our processes and cascade. However, in these industries, 5 minutes doesn't equal a person's salary. It's the stakes are so much higher here, and there is so much money on the line that that's where that investment comes. Is a tool that can be smart enough and empower people well enough to fix this before it happens. And so you're not.
Well,
going into an
Definitely.
Excel
I
sheet
think,
because you can digitize poorly, right?
Yeah, Annika alluded to it a little bit about the minor stops. Listen, minor stops out on a factory floor can be anywhere from 6 to 8% of your downtime, and if you don't have you don't have any way to capture that. I mean, this is the classic tried and true hidden factory.
Yeah.
I'm losing 8% of downtime, and I don't know where it's at. I don't know when it happens. It's just out there. It just shows up like a ghost on my sheets that I'm losing, and I don't know why I'm losing. Right? It's just like
Yeah.
getting to the end of a ball game and seeing that the score is lower, but you're not sure why it's lower. I just don't know. And so capturing that and having technology that helps you capture that and gets to that minor stops, and having people help record those things is hugely important. But we just are tired of not seeing what we can't see, and it doesn't have to happen like that anymore.
No, totally.
That's
The ghosts of downtime, right?
You're
yeah.
right. The ghost of downtime. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. I know it's here. I just don't know. Right?
Where is it?
It's
Yeah,
where
is
is
it
it?
gonna scare me next time?
Right.
Right?
And
Right.
that's
Totally the hidden factory. That's why we
very
call it the hidden factory.
very reflected in the data here as well. Is 72% of our respondents say that this hidden factory, exactly that, these undocumented fixes and adjustments are a major contributing factor to downtime.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
broad majority of people. And you know what? As with all these things, the reality might even be higher. These, some people might not even know that they are experiencing, these are the people who know that this hidden factory is contributing to their downtime. I'm sure there's people out there who are just stuck with bad numbers and losses and, are still need to be guided on that journey of like, hey, you're actually losing due to these factors here.
Yeah. And I think
Well,
actually one thing, sorry.
that's all right. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was going to say I used to tell the story about you bring a new machine in on the floor, and you bolt it to the floor, and somebody starts running this machine, and over time, as they learn how to make these little small tweaks, and they learn how to do this, and they start to get this little minor stop, and they think, oh, this is just something with this new machine, and then you bring in a new employee, and you train that new employee, and that new employee all day long does these minor stops and fixes these minor stops, and doesn't even realize that this is not normal. This is an abnormality. But what they've learned is that this is part of the job. And so they just kind of deal with it, and because they think that's how you run this machine. And so not only is it hidden, not only are we capturing it, it's actually becoming part of the process. The loss is baked into the process because the new employee through generations has just learned that, every once in a while I got to walk over here and I got to unjam this thing. That's just how this machine is, and every once in a while, I don't know if you guys know this, but in manufacturing plants, we have what's called hopper boppers. Have you ever heard of a hopper bopper? Right?
No, I love
or
it.
a shepherd's crook. A hopper bopper, you walk around a factory and you'll see a stick, and on the end of that stick is a roll of paper towels with a bunch of duct tape around it, right? And so you have these hoppers that feed parts down to the production line, and they get stuck. And so people take these things and they call hopper boppers, and you just beat on the side of the hopper to unjam things. So we call them hopper boppers, right? Or a shepherd's crook, right? They have to reach in and unjam something.
Wow.
And they just think it's just part of the natural way
Sounds
that you do business.
Yeah.
Safe.
Isn't that crazy as well? Because at the end of the day, I think that's more than just a problem with, those people who actually use the hopper boppers. I
Yeah.
think it's a clear sign of leadership disconnect.
It's an acceptance. Yeah.
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 And
Totally.
honestly, I think, that's a huge concern. I think especially for executives, we had in our data 31% of respondents, so that's 1 in 3, said that leadership misalignment in terms of expectations are actively hindering their ability to improve uptime. Isn't that crazy? I think
Yeah.
the hopper bopper there is the perfect example of
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And I think there's clearly a disconnect between C-suite, everybody sitting at HQ, their understanding of operation and what's actually happening on the floor. Like, what does reality look like? The data is there, but it's not reaching decision makers in a way they can actually act on.
Yeah, the hopper bopper is literally physical manifestation of the lack of leadership, right? That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So
That's beautiful.
But what a hopper bopper is also is that it is a physical manifestation of the ability of the shop floor worker to circumvent problems and get you what you need, even though you're putting barriers in their way. And so they're gonna come up with ways to do that. So wouldn't it be great if we could use that knowledge to solve the problem as opposed to come up with a way to work around the problem? You know what I mean?
And connect the problems with each other so that we can integrate better and have a better understanding of kind of that whole chain reaction, but kind of from a positive spin.
Yep. Yeah, I'm losing 8% a day, and where does it come from? It comes from that guy walking over there and have to smack the side of the feeder.
I can't wait for the Hopper Boppers clip to go live. I'm on the content side of things. I'm sitting over here smiling because I get to type the word Hopper Bopper at least
Hopper
once.
Bopper. That's right. That's
That's
right.
fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, who would have thought? Was that on your bingo card today, Chris?
Absolutely
Hopper Bopper?
not.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. But, it's always exciting here at L2L. I think this is a great moment to move on to kind of my next framework, which is the impact beyond cost of downtime. We've talked about these incredible 6-7 figure costs of this, but it's not all money. Actually, I think a large amount of downtime's impact, it's a hard thing to say, isn't financial, in that it is, you look at leadership who's frustrated by this growing hidden factory. They can't connect the dots. They don't understand why they're losing or what they can do to fix it. And you look at the front line who are left to their own devices often for solving these problems without the right kind of guidance or intervention or communication. And it really starts to affect the way that people feel about their jobs and about going to work every single day. 27% of our respondents, so about 1 in 3, say that production slowdowns negatively impact their morale. And those in supply chain management were 26% more likely to say this. So, roughly half of people in supply chain management say that downtime is, I think the report, the actual data, the question that we asked people, they said it was negatively impacting their sanity, which I think speaks volumes. Like, these people are kind of going nuts because of this consistent but very fixable problem in their operations. And I'm sure that both of you have seen that when you're talking to a customer, when you're talking to a prospect or a colleague in manufacturing, right? Like, it'll drive you nuts.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that, looking at the responses we got, it's not just, impacting their sanity. Actually, the specific word that came up most often in those responses was frustration. So people are super frustrated with downtime and everything that has to do with downtime. And I think especially, in today's tight labor market, that's not just a morale issue. I think, it has to do with retention. It's a retention risk as well. So if you have problems, with that leadership disconnect and the hopper bopper problem, accepting downtime and not doing anything about it and kind of having this culture of reactivity, I think definitely that's going to impact probably, your team, of course, as well, because they feel like they're constantly fighting fires instead of making progress. And, that's probably when they start looking at LinkedIn.
Yeah, in the history of manufacturing, there have never been two things that have happened. There has never been an operator that got to the end of the day, made a record run of production, and said, I've had a horrible day. The machine ran all day long and I didn't get to do anything. Nobody's ever said that. On the other side of that, there's never been anybody in production that said, you know what? I had to fight this thing all day long. It was up, it was down, I was having trouble, and man, did I have a great day. Nobody has ever said that in production at all, right? It's the exact opposite. When people come in, when you break a record, when you break a production record, when you do great things, people are like, that was a great day. I'm going to go home. I'm going to play with the dog. I'm going to, go to the ball game. Everything's great. But when they have to fight the machine all day long and it's frustration all day long, that's when they walk home and that's when they have a hard time, and it just manifests itself throughout their entire, work-life balance. So yeah, it directly impacts people's attitudes and thought processes. Definitely.
There's a statistic here that we got it from the report that really it broke my heart because I think it just embodies this kind of defeated attitude and this frustrated attitude. 55%. So 1 out of 2 respondents to this survey said that downtime feels like a when and not an if. And we already talked about you're going to have downtime. We know that it's a reality, but just the way that people feel about it in their day-to-day job, it feels like this inevitability that's going to happen and that they expect things to fail. And I don't think that that's a particularly enjoyable culture to work in and day out, right? And exactly like you said, they're going to leave. They're going to move to an organization that can take care of this stuff and provide real solutions.
Yeah. And I think it's really about competitive advantage, not just from a labor perspective, but also obviously, if you can prevent downtime, that equals predictability, right? You can plan better. And I think, from our answers in this research report, there were a couple shared common threads between the people who said that they see measurable improvement in the number of downtime that they've been seeing. And those are 3 points that I want to make here. So stronger maintenance protocols. I think we talked about that at length earlier in this podcast. Second one, real-time visibility into machine performance. Important. And third one, improved root cause analysis. So, okay, why is this happening? What happened the last time? How did we fix that? So in tight margin environments like, today, I think that operational predictability becomes your competitive advantage. So while competitors are scrambling to explain those delays and the winners, the companies that are constantly hitting targets are actually looking they're not just looking at the now, but they're also they're analyzing what caused those problems in the past. They're looking at the data and they have very strong, proactive maintenance protocols.
Yeah, your point is exactly right. If you look at a manufacturing plant, all manufacturing plants, all competitors are the same. They all have access to the same machines. They all have access to the same raw material. They all have access to the same information. What they don't have access to are the quality of the people and the quality of the processes that they have. So the better the processes, the better the people, i.e. training, culture, all of those things. That is the competitive advantage, right? That is the difference, because I can go buy the exact same machine my competitor has and still lose. It's the culture, it's the training, it's the systems and processes that we put in place that's going to give us that competitive advantage to go win and solve those problems like you were talking about, Annika.
I think it's amazing that only 40 40% of the respondents say that they don't even have a consistent downtime tracking system in place. So that's almost half of the people surveyed across every manufacturing industry that you can think of, across all roles, say that they don't even have a way to track it consistently. That we are starting from so far behind the finish line that it's no wonder that people are struggling, that their processes aren't even in place to measure it effectively. And I think it's amazing when you start looking at some of these kind of root problems as well. Just by the numbers, 72% of our respondents still manually check in on downtime events. I know, Annika, you shared a statistic that a lot of that is also from the executive level as well. But that's 3/4 of people are moving their bodies to the area on the shop floor where a problem occurs, and actually looking into it instead of using some sort of remote or digital way of looking in on individual events.
Yeah, no,
Um,
totally. And I think, that lagging effect of those, tech
yeah,
adoption that you're pointing to, I think there's appetite for solutions, but apparently there is a gap between wanting to modernize and actually achieving results. And apparently, based on our results, the number one barrier is implementation speed, especially for larger organizations. That's apparently the number one barrier. So I thought that was actually pretty fascinating and kind of, you know, talks to this contradiction about, people wanting solutions, but,
yeah.
there are blockers.
It's
I
truly a
think,
failure to launch type of thought process, isn't it? Right?
yeah.
It's a fear of failure, fear of taking too long, fear of lack of impact, wanting to have immediate impact. I have problems today. I don't want to wait a year to put a system in place that's going to help solve the problem that I have today, because in a lot of industries, that problem may very well be gone. We may change models, we may change products. That problem could be gone in a year from now. I don't want to spend a year putting a system in place that I'm not going to get any value from. So yeah, I can see that definitely.
Yeah, no,
90
100%.
93% of our respondents, the overwhelming majority, almost 100%, say that they've taken steps to address downtime. But only 43% say that it's been effective, which I think goes to show that there are so many blockers and problems that can crop up during an implementation
Yeah.
or an attempt at a solution. Eric, I'm wondering if you could maybe shine some light. We're gonna have to wrap up kind of soon, but I'm wondering if you can shine a light on what what might that look like when an organization says, "Hey, we are going to take steps to address downtime," and then they get it wrong. What does it look like? What does that stutter stop kind of look like in real terms?
Well, I think what it looks like when they have trouble is that there's a lack of understanding, and we talked about it here a minute ago with the preventative stuff. You get a lot of one-off initiatives, right?
Hmm.
People will say, in order to stop downtime, what I need to do is I need to connect all my machines, right? I got to get all the connection. Or in order to stop downtime, I've got to do more preventative maintenance. But they don't understand that it's a holistic approach to the whole process, right? That you have to have everybody involved. You have to be able to, right? The analogy is that when you call to make a flight to somewhere, the first thing that the lady wants to know is, where are you? You have to know where you're at in order to make a flight to go somewhere. So the first thing you have to know is where you're at. We've learned that through all of our years of Toyota production system training, is that understanding the current condition is the root of trying to start to get better. And we do that very well with dispatch. is to try to document, okay, what is actually happening on the shop floor, getting everybody involved, from the operator to the engineer to the mechanic to the office person. Everybody is involved, telling us what's going on. Once we get a clear understanding of all the minor stops, all the breakdowns, all the quality issues, all that stuff, now we can start going and solving the problem. But we can't just stab at it and hope we hit something. We have to understand truly what's going on. So
I 100% agree with you, Eric. And, I think, the one core learning for me from this research and kind of what it really reveals is that clearly, obviously, we already knew this, but downtime is not a maintenance problem. It's a systems problem.
that's
It's
exactly
about
right.
visibility, it's about communication, and it's about having the right information at the right time. So I think the manufacturers who crack this aren't just saving money, they're creating capacity without capital investment. They're improving team morale as well, probably retaining some of their top talent at the same time, and obviously building that operational resilience for the long term. So I think that's the kind of operational excellence that shows up in your margins, but also in your customer satisfaction and ultimately your competitiveness.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful place to end this podcast. There it is. We have talked at length about our new manufacturing research report. This time we are looking into downtime, its causes, its solutions. What are manufacturers out there right now struggling with? What are they doing to solve it? Where does the root cause lie? We've talked about a lot of that on this podcast. However, there's a ton more data in the research report itself. So I'd urge you, go ahead, click that link and go and download it for free yourself and take a look. It's also beautiful. So shout out to the team for putting together another great report. And remember that downtime reduction is probably the highest ROI investment that you can make today. I mean, you're talking about astronomical numbers. So thank you very much, Annika. Thank you, Eric, for joining us for another fantastic episode of the Manufacturing Stream podcast. And until next time, thanks and good night.
Thank you so much. This was
Thanks.
fun.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Chris. See you. Bye.
Bye.